Hey everybody, welcome to episode 31 of Open Play Podcast. I'm here with about half our contingent this week because of vacations and, life happenings. Alex, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you doing today?
Not too bad. Preston, what about you? How you doing?
Oh, I'm doing great.
So let's talk about some Warhammer stuff. Somebody took a few weeks off because somebody was on vacation who will be unnamed, namely me. How's y'all's hopping going? Alex, are you working on any NIDs or are you just moving still?
Still just keeping everything packed up. So we haven't started moving yet, but we're doing like showings and stuff. So I was trying to keep everything neat. So I have to pull all of my hobby stuff out, then put it back away a day later. So have not been doing a whole lot, but I've been spending a pretty good time just keeping up with all like the interesting, meta that we're currently sitting in that we'll talk about later.
And what about you, Preston? What you got going on?
I'm currently working on a big project, with big being the operative word here. I'm working on finishing up my town R. So we've got our biannual charity event coming up this weekend that I'm going to be bringing it towards. So it's all built. Some of it's painted. Hopefully finish the painting this week, but if not, it'll bleed into next week. But yeah, it's definitely the largest project I've ever done, so it's been interesting to work with.
You gotta post some photos of that, because, yeah, definitely need to see that in all its glory. I'm curious people's reactions when you show up to the charity event with it.
So I am running a Town R, a Storm Surge, and 3 Riptides. And that's like 1,700 points. And the Town R is twice as tall as the Storm Surge, which is very funny to me because it makes it look like an actual normal-sized model.
Is it a Titanic towering, I guess?
Yeah, 100%. It's 800 points.
800? Jesus. I mean, I can't really complain. I mean, I brought 1,300 points in 3 models, so I mean, each their own. Nothing wrong with that. And it's for charity, and it'll be fun. I do want to see some photos of different armies you're going against and just how badly that thing destroys them.
If they have a large vehicle that doesn't have a 4-up invuln, it's in trouble, because it's strength 26, flat 16 damage, plus all the other random guns. But yeah, I'll hopefully remember to take pics. I'm usually pretty bad about that, but maybe I'll remember this time.
Good luck with that. I will not be at that particular event this go around. My hobby stuff lately, I'm printing. Yeah, I got the new printer hooked up finally. It came in right before I left on vacation, so I didn't get a chance to mess with it till this weekend. And I'm printing in a whole bunch of sister stuff currently. Got 2 castigators mostly printed, as well as 2 emulators mostly printed. I got the last plate going now, which isn't bad for $30 bottle of resin to get 4 tanks and 6 Paragon warsuits out of it.
Yeah, that's a good bang for your buck right there. I don't suppose you have any jump cannonesses lying around on your STL database.
I might, actually.
Because I am not trying to pay $230 for a single jump cannoness.
But yeah, that's mostly it, printing, and I did get a little bit of hobbing done on vacation. It was extremely hot, and there was always something going on, so I didn't do a ton of hobbing, but I did get 5 Seraphim built, jump canoness, and the Palatine and the Hospitaller. I got those models built, but I'm not attaching to bases yet, because I'm thinking about getting 3D printed bases that I can do like smoke and stuff, so I don't have to attach them to those fiddly little flight stands.
Yeah, that jump canoness looked kind of rough.
Yeah, I got her on the little small piece of plastic. It's not terrible. It mounts a little bit weird, but worst case, I'll just snap it off and do something else for that one. But I mean, it's better than the little clear plastic flight stand, I think, honestly. Painted some city stuff. I have most of that army painted at this point. I almost have everything for Spearhead as well. I need to build 1 model for that. Waiting on all the Sigmar stuff to come in, which should be Wednesday. Like 2 boxes plus a third for Mason, because he's getting it shipped to my house, because he's out of town this week, which is why he's not here. And otherwise, I'll be building like 120 clan rats.
Why would you be working on so much Sigmar stuff?
It's just one of those things. I felt it was probably time to work on my Sigmar stuff, because I think something new came out in the past weekend. I think they released some new dice or something like that.
I heard there was a box. Maybe it had some stuff in it.
Yeah, it's a pretty heavy box from what I hear. With 40 clan rats and Sigmar Marines, that's whatever, Stormcast. That's okay. But it's got 2 nice rulebooks in it. I think we're going to look to do some Spearhead on the 27th, I think. Get a few games in that day with whoever shows up.
Yeah, I will not be in town for that, but I hope it goes well.
Yeah, Spearhead looks like it'll be a lot of fun. Plus, I mean, we all have, majority of us have at least 1 Sigmar army we can play. Like, I'll bring OBR, I'll bring cities. I may bring Skaven if I have enough built and ready to go just to try it out.
I'm sure Will has orcs.
Yeah, does he though? I know he's got a lot of Skaven. I don't know if he has a lot of orcs though.
Can you not just proxy orcs as orcs? Are they not that sideways compatible? I feel like with his 80 billion points. He's got something in there.
He has to.
We could make it happen. I mean, for our games, it'd be fine. But, I don't know, they all have guns, and we'll see how that works. I don't know. Why, he'll just bring some orcs or a buggy or something to run as the big pig, because that model is actually kind of neat. The big pig with the 3 orcs on it. Came out last year, I think. So, other than Age of Sigmar stuff, let's talk about some 40k stuff. So, I know, Preston, amongst the group, you've been doing more games lately than most of us. How's Pariah Nexus feeling? How are the new mission cards feeling for what you've been playing?
Yeah, so I've got about 15 games of Pariah at this point. I'm definitely really enjoying it just as a whole. Obviously, nothing's ever perfect, but it definitely feels like we had been playing sort of a pre-release up until now. The new, like, the way actions work is a lot cleaner, and then just some of the core rule changes they made, especially the stratagem stuff, just feels as a universal whole. It feels cleaner and more accessible for a lot of armies. I'm not going to go over too much of like the rule stuff again because we've already gone over it before. I'm just going to talk about like my impressions of playing the missions. I've played at least one of all of the new primary types, and I'm pretty sure I've played all the new deployment zones. So yeah, just as a whole, they're pretty good. Linchpin is obviously just basically taken hold, so I have got no complaints with that one. Terraform is definitely the strangest to me. I don't particularly enjoy it, but I mean, I never really like primaries that involve actions. I feel like with secondaries having a lot of actions in the deck, I would prefer not to have both of my forms of scoring tied up into actions. And I also feel like Terraform is very go first heavy because you can push some stuff out into the center and Terraform, and it's very hard to recover from that as a person going second. But we'll have to wait and see how it develops. Maybe it ends up being more even than my first impressions.
Have you been playing any of the the terrain layouts as well, or just whatever terrain's available?
Yeah, we've been doing the new GW layouts. GW 1 and 2 for Pariah Nexus are GW 4 and 3 respectively from Leviathan, so I've got no complaints with those. They're mostly okay. The ones that I personally have issues with are ones like GW 7 and 8, I believe, which have ruins that go directly on the side of the board. And so, especially with GW's FAQ in the mission pack, that if you're, more than an inch off the wall, you can't be charged through it because there's no fighting through a wall. Like, you can't pretend you're inside the wall. It just creates really large, inaccessible zones of the board where you can't go around the ruins with your vehicles. You can't go through the ruins with your infantry. So it's just a whole, 8 to 10 inch wide zone that is unable to be shot or charged or really interacted with unless you're some of the very specific fast armies that can just physically go up the middle and around the ruin. I'm not really sure. I don't think there will be a solution for that because they've never modified the terrain as far as I'm aware, so hopefully I just don't see those layouts a lot. I'm just not a big fan of it. As a whole though, they're fine. Some of them are better than others on certain terrain layouts, but that's just how it works. You can't make ones that are good in all scenarios. So it'll just be an exercise in figuring out which ones are the best where, which ones are the most universal, and then just really nailing down which ones feel the best to play.
Yeah, I'm looking at the mission pool right now, and I mean, there's 8 missions that have 7 and 8 available, and then there's another 4 that just have 8 available. So there's a good chance that someone's going to run into either of those missions, those layouts rather.
Going back to the missions, I finally got the list pulled up. Burden of Trust is fine. It's the one where you have to nominate defenders for your objectives. There's a very weird sort of timing where you nominate a defender in your command phase, and so I've had to catch a lot of people on that who try to move on to an objective and then say, okay, I'm going to defend it with this unit. It's no, they have to be standing on it at the start of your turn, and then they have to keep standing on it for an entire turn. They can still shoot and fight and whatever, but you can't move on to an objective and then elect to defend it. I would assume that's intentional, and it probably is fine. It's just not intuitive to players who aren't completely reading the mission, which I'm guilty of myself, so completely understandable. Overall, the mission's fine. If I play it, I play it. If I don't, I don't.
While we're speaking about Burden of Trust, have you seen the discussion on Burden of Trust in the Dawn of War deployment having an abysmal first turn win rate?
Yes, I glanced through that post, and I'm pretty sure that what the consensus was is that's the default layout for a mission in the Tabletop Battles app, and so it's just a bunch of garbage data. Because if you actually look at the lettered missions in the Nexus tournament pack, that's not a GW recommended layout. So it's all custom entries, which I assume is just people making a default custom mission and then either not returning to the not deleting it from the pool or whatever. Just I assume it's garbage data.
Okay, because I was curious about that too. I had seen them kind of mention that, and I was curious if you had any insight on why that might be potentially throwing something out of whack.
Yeah, the only ones that have Dawn of War in the Pariah Nexus pack are S&T, which are Linchpin and Servo Skulls. I refuse to call it Unexploded Ordnance because it's Servo Skulls. More impressions for me beyond that. The secondaries. As a whole, I think the secondaries are pretty good. Fixed is definitely very unattractive. in my experiences. The Bring It Down changes are enormous nerfs. Full Knights armies, which are the poster child for Bring It Down, barely give up 20 if you table them. My Tau lists, like where I have 3 Riptides and 3 Devilfish and a Hammerhead, gives up 16 points, which is absurd. I think they might have to tweak the scoring to be a bit more attractive, but maybe not. Maybe this is just the world we live in and we have to get used to it. Currently, if you kill a model that's got 14 wounds, it gives up 2 points, which is, as a Tau player, those are my Riptides and like my Hammerheads. And that's a really feels bad breakpoint, I think. But a Piranha or a Drukhari Venom or like any of the really tiny vehicles are worth the same as like the 200-point giant vehicles. And then the action secondaries all are scoring pretty low as well. Like they nerfed Established Locus, which was old Teleport Homer. It's now 2 in the center instead of 3. Cleanse is a little bit harder. It's just very unattractive to take fixed. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing if GW is trying to design tactical to be like the default. Maybe they'd want to just phase directly into tactical like next edition or 2 editions from now. I don't know. I definitely wouldn't be opposed to that, but
How are you feeling about battle line at this point? Any impact at all, or is most people just kind of ignoring it if it comes up? Cool. If it doesn't, it's whatever.
yeah, that's generally how I feel about it. If you were to say like I'm going to play any given mission, like say you were going to just hit random on your missions every time you played, I would not build your list around battle line because they're too sporadic in their impact and some of them just aren't really impactful rules in the first place. If I was going to like a big GT and I looked at, a 5-round mission list that was posted early and I saw like maybe 4 of the missions had real impactful battle line rules, maybe I would look at my list again. But just as a whole, for playing a random mission on the pack or just a random mission in general, I wouldn't skew heavily into battle line. I would recommend everybody bring at least 1 battle line unit minimum because there's a secret mission that depends on having battle line units in certain spots of the board. And so if you don't bring any battle line at all, that's sort of an auto like give up to the opponent. But if you're bringing 1 or 2 battle line units already, I wouldn't go into 2 or 3 or 4. I wouldn't make the list weaker just on the off chance that it does something. The most impactful battle line rules that I've seen are the ones to advance an action with battle lines, which is always good. It just gives extra speed to your actions. There is one that lets your battle line units heroic and go to ground for free. That one is the strongest because there are some real strong battle line units that can take advantage of it. You can get like some Fights First Berserkers with free heroic in World Eaters. You can get Custodian Guards or Grey Knight Terminators with free heroic. Even just like the random Grively Infantry, like Tau Breachers, they just get a 6-up invul now because they go to ground for free, or they can stand in the open and get cover because they go to ground for free. It's probably the strongest rule. Again, even if I saw it come up in a mission pack, I wouldn't change my list to build around it. It's just something extra to consider, and it's a nice touch. I think GW really did balance them well. I would not have liked them if they were all super impactful and they just made you bring battle line because the battle line rules were so strong. So I think they overhyped it, but I'm also sort of glad they overhyped it. I think it's in a good spot.
Well, I mean, how many armies have more than 1 battle line unit anyway?
I think most of them have 2, to be honest. There's very few that have more than 2.
Yeah, no, like World Eaters, I have Jackals and Berserkers. And always bring Jackals, don't always bring Berserkers, though. Still think they're priced too high, but
The new deployments, they're just fine. Deployments are never super crazy. Obviously, we had talked about them being a little bit closer, and that gets the party going a little bit sooner on some missions. Makes you think a little bit more about deploying on the line or exposed or whatever. But just as a whole, it's nice to see some variety. Tipping Point is sort of a weird one, but I have not really minded playing that. That's the one I've played the most. I think it's because it's the most accessible to people. It's standard Dawn of War / Crucible. The weird sweeping engagement one, where it's the hot dog style, the long ways step deployment, I've only played it once, and again, I just felt like I was playing Dawn of War, which I'm never really a fan of, but they keep putting into the game, so I'm going to have to keep playing it.
Yeah, Tipping Point looks interesting. I'm looking at a Goonhammer article right now about it, just to see the layouts, because I can remember which one that one was. But yeah, they're up close and personal, and makes my army happy anyway. Because I like being able to run into you without needing a huge charge to get into whatever you put on the line.
As far as the specific secondary missions, I know I talked about Fix First Tactical, but the new specific secondary missions, I'm a big fan of the ones that redraw when you can't do them. I've drawn Call the Horde in a lot of games, and that secondary is just literally impossible for a lot of the armies in the game to even give up. Again, going back to Tau, the only way you could ever possibly score Call the Horde against Tau is if they brought 20 Kroot. That's the only 20-man unit in the army. So having redraws on some of them is nice. Having some of them that discard on the first turn that previously didn't is nice. I would say, I don't even know if it's the worst design one. It's between Marked for Death and Recover Assets. So Marked for Death is the one where you pick 3 of your own units, and if the opponent kills one of them, they get 5 points. Originally, this one looked really, really bad, like before we actually got the whole pack, because you just say, oh, you pick 3 units that are in the back lines or whatever, and you never give it up. And that does happen sometimes if you're playing armies with a lot of trash, or if you're just on the first or second turn. But it actually is a lot harder than it sounds, especially when you get into turn, 3 onward. There's not 3 units that are impossible to kill. It might be less attractive to kill some of them if they're, maybe not where you want to be focusing the majority of your fire, or they're not an immediate threat. But I have found that Mark for Death is actually a lot more scoreable than I thought it would be, and 5 points is a lot more than you're usually getting off a secondary now. They've definitely lowered the overall scoring output of your army, with most of the action ones going like 2, 3, 4 points total, and then the kill ones, or just the ones that aren't actions, are scoring a little bit higher now. So that does make Mark for Death a little more attractive to go after, just because 5 points is quite a lot. Recover Assets is one of the action ones. It's my least favorite one for sure. You have to do an action in 3 areas of the board: your DZ, no man's land, and opponent's DZ, and then you have to live for an entire turn. And if you live with 2 units, or units in 2 zones, you get 3 points. And if you live in all 3 zones, you get 6 points. And just go ahead and scratch that second part off, because that is never going to happen in a million bajillion years. You're never going to be in your opponent's deployment zone and able to give up the tempo of not having the unit do anything and then also have them live, unless you're like bottom of turn 5 and they're tabled, in which case it doesn't even matter. So having to give up 2 units actions in 2 areas of the board for 3 points is probably the worst ratio of points to units in the deck. Cleanse comes pretty close, because cleansing on objectives that you control for 2 points apiece without being able to advance and do it is also sort of hard. I don't know how I would fix Recover Assets. Maybe if it scored immediately it would be fine, but having to commit them for a full turn is very rough.
And as far as scoring goes, how are you seeing total scores play out from your games? Are they, are we still going to expect scores to be 90 to 100 for a lot of games? Or are they going to be overall lower in that 70 to 80 range? I mean, what you got to tell you there based on what you're seeing?
I think your average score goes down by about 5 points. I don't think that's a particularly hot take. I'm pretty sure I've said that, multiple times when we were going through the previews. It's just because of the secondaries. The secondaries all on average score maybe a point lower. So over the course of the game, if you drop a secondary and, maybe you only get the first half of a couple, like you get 1 cleanse, or you get small teleport homer, it adds up. You'll go from scoring a 90 to an 83 or an 84. I played in an event yesterday, and throughout the entire event, nobody scored 100, even with some people getting tabled on turns 4 and 5. So yeah, I think the wins go down by about 5 to 10 points. Maybe your losses go down by a little bit more, because when you're behind, it's harder to come back. Secret missions do help. We can talk about secret missions later, but just as a whole, I think the scoring goes down a little bit.
I mean, that's a good segue though for secret missions, as far as, the tournament you're in and just other games. Are you seeing people use them? Because we never saw gambits, but do you see secret missions coming out?
Yeah, 100%. And when I say 100%, it's not like every game somebody's going to take a secret mission. It's more like if you go to an event, you're going to take a secret mission once. Like if I'm going to a 3-round event and I'm taking a secret mission 1 out of those 3 games, I would not be surprised in the slightest. I think that's a reasonable stat. If I'm going to a 5 or 6-round event, if I'm taking a secret mission once or twice over the course of that, that would again be perfectly reasonable to me right now. They're not too strong, but they're too good of an option to not consider them. There's a lot of armies that don't want to have to push back against early primary rushes, like if you're playing against orcs or you're playing against custodes. You can feel comfortable falling behind, knowing that, especially if you're going second, you can make it up later, and you just focus on killing their resources, denying their secondary, scoring your own, and you know that you have that primary swing guaranteed.
And they're all 20 VP, right? Capped at 20, and then you score 20 if you win?
Yes. So it caps your primary score at 20, and then if you succeed on the secret mission, you get 20 points. That's a little bit of a, semantics here. People typically say secret missions cap your primary at 40. That's not true. It caps your primary at 20, and then succeeding at the mission gives you another 20 points. So you can't score like 25 to 30 on just your primary score and fail the secret mission. You would only get 20 points for that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of, at least one secret mission that looks more attainable than the others, like Unbroken Wall.
Definitely the most attainable, at least from a generic sense, is the one just to hold 3 objectives. I agree. Just bottom of turn, turn, run onto 3 objectives. If you're playing a mission with hidden supplies, it's even easier. And you can sort of plan towards that. You just shore up your high OC units and run them out, especially if your opponent doesn't have the resources to physically wall off the objectives. It can be kind of difficult to stop. And then the one that I actually look for a lot, maybe it's just because of the army I'm playing, is putting battle line inside of your opponent's deployment zone, because it's not wholly within, it's just touching within. And deployment zones are pretty big. When you're playing on a map that's 44 by 60, that means your deployment zone line is 44 inches long or 60 inches long. Like, you can't physically block them off from reaching it a lot of the time. So if you're looking at another army, and this is why I talked about always bringing at least one battle line unit, and you say, hey, they don't have any battle line left alive, they had one unit of Griblies who got sacrificed for an early objective or whatever, I'm just going to stage up this battle line unit behind this wall, and then I'm just going to advance them forward and touch your DZ, and that's 20 points.
Yeah, that one's definitely attainable by a lot of armies, I think.
Especially anything that's got a redeploy. Like, can you imagine demons? They redeploy 3 Nurglings, and then they deep strike them within 3 inches. Like, how on earth are you going to stop them from doing that?
Yeah, it doesn't say you don't have to control any objective. You just got to be in the deployment zone. So yeah, they're OCE 0 now, so they can't. But yeah, just that seems like that's an easy get. But I don't know. Again, you got to be at that point. I mean, you have to be that far behind to know that you're going to need to do that.
Yeah, you do have to be at least tied on primary. I've definitely taken a secret mission, once or twice in a matchup that I know is going to be slow. Like a grindy, low-scoring primary matchup, like maybe Linchpin, right? Where you're scoring 3 points for your home and 5 points for your, expansion. And if you're looking at the table and you're saying, hey, neither of us are going to be holding the center, like, at all, I might as well take the secret mission. Because if I score 8 points a turn for 4 turns, that's only 32. So I can take the secret mission and, get that 40. And that's even better than what I would normally be getting, even if I know I'm not, like, losing hard.
Yeah, I'm glad these are getting more play, because Gambits just weren't good. They never got played. And let me correct myself. I've never seen them get played. You ever see anybody play Gambit?
Not in person. At least decently well-known fact that Scary has won a game off of a Gambit, and I'm pretty sure he ended up winning the GT he went to because of that. But beyond that, I think maybe that's the only time a Gambit has ever done anything for anybody. So I can honestly say I'm pretty sure I went the entirety of Leviathan never even asking my opponent if they wanted to take a Gambit. It was always just assumed that we wouldn't be.
Yeah, I never heard anybody do that at the Richmond GT we went to. Just it wasn't done. So let's talk current meta dashboard.
So right off the bat, there's a big number up there, and it starts with a 6. We've got Drukhari at 61%. And a lot of people might be surprised by this, because Drukhari was not really a well-known entity. When they were Real Space Raid as their only detachment, they pretty much never saw any play outside of Scary. They were very bad. They didn't have any real synergies going on. Their detachment rule was sort of a joke. And then they got buffed in January with the new Sky Splinter Assault detachment, and it gave them real rules that benefited the army in a real way in accordance with the faction rule buff, which gave them +1 AP whenever they use a pain token. And then it made the army actually play like the army people wanted. And so they have been creeping up since then. They were never like real terror threats. I couldn't even tell you if they were north or south of 50% overall. But they were a legitimate faction that you could play and do well with after that.
So there's one Real Space Raiders guy that's just skewing the stats.
Yeah. Going into Pariah Nexus, they actually did take a couple hits. They took a points nerf to the Scourge, which are the Fire and Fade dudes with heavy weapons that were just completely obnoxious because they would try to pop tanks and you could never interact with them. And it was completely okay. They took like 10 points per, and you still take, 15 of them, and it's whatever. But the real strength of Drukhari was not in any direct buff to them, but just a general shift of the metagame and how the new tournament pack works, and that's really hard to quantify before it comes out. Drukhari massively benefit from secret missions, first of all, because they're an army that's elves, right? So they just naturally struggle to hold primary. Well, now they've got a built-in way to catch up on primary every game, especially if they go second. Their battle line units are legitimately good. Cavalites can get combat squadded into squads of 5. They've got heavy weapons. The Venom is legitimately good transport that lets them get out and get back in, so they essentially get Fire and Fade for free, because you can put the transport behind the wall, get the Cavalites out, shoot with them, +1 AP, ignore cover from the detachment rule, and pain tokens. And they're just solid overall. They've got sticky, they're 2 OC, so you're seeing, 2x5, 4x5 Cavalites in pretty much every list. So they've got the battle line part covered. And they are fast. So all these action secondaries that rely on you on being in parts of the boards, well, they're elves, so they're naturally fast. I believe Cavalites move 8 base, which is a little obscene. They've got Mandrakes, who have the scouts rule to go back up, except Mandrakes get to go back up into deep strike. Their weapons have dev wounds for whatever reason, and they're still 65 points. So they've got just a host of trash scoring units that are fast, that can get around the board and score secondaries, and just generally be obnoxious for the entire game. And then that couples with the January updates to their army to make them really more killy, with the Archons giving reroll wounds to Incubi. Incubi can pretty much tear up anything that doesn't kill them in Overwatch, and just a host of other generic good units that you really have to see to understand, like the Beast Pack. The Beast Pack is just an obnoxious scouting unit. It scouts 9, it moves 12, it charges you, it's got a bajillion attacks that get AP from a pain token, it's got like 8 different models that all have a different wound count, so it's really annoying to get through with multi-damage weapons because they can allocate however they want. It's just a good collection of stuff that all adds up to play the Pariah Nexus mission pack really, really well. And so I'm not surprised to see them up at the top here. 61% is probably over-exaggerated from the early days. Everything is pretty much guaranteed to go up or down depending on whether it's at the top or bottom as we get more reliable data and people start to figure things out. But I would not be surprised to see them settle around that 52, 53, 54% win rate.
Well, Tacoma's this coming weekend, so we'll have more data after that as well. More games, and we'll see how it actually shakes out after Tacoma.
The other top factions that are north of the coveted Goldilocks zone we've got up here. Space Wolves, I don't think is a surprise to pretty much anybody who is paying attention. Space Wolves were the top army for the last few months of Leviathan. They took some points nerfs, and they took like the OC nerf to Wolfen, who really don't care. And then they got a rules update to Champions of Russ, and Stormlance is obviously very good. So that just sort of all came out in the wash, and they're still one of the top armies.
Champions of Russ is almost equally played to Stormlance as well. So, I mean, a lot of people seem to be going with the actual army rule for that rather than just a generic Space Marine rule.
Yeah, the strength of Stormlance is that you get the army-wide advance and charge all game. And Champions of Russ really made up for that with their free saga, because one of the sagas unlocks a stratagem to get advance and charge. So you can just start the game with the stratagem for advance and charge. It's obviously not as good as army-wide advance and charge for free, but it shores it up in other ways by getting, the sustained and the lethal and the feel no pain and the other host of good stratagems inside Champions of Russ. So I'm not surprised to see Space Wolves up here. I expect them to stay up here. Sisters, again, this is not a terrible surprise to anybody, I think. They were, bar none, going to be the best army in the game before the points were revealed, and then afterwards it was a little bit more up in the air, but they've settled, and I say settled, it's been, only a few weeks, but they've still settled into one of the top armies. They've got multiple different ways to play. Bringers of Flame is very strong base. Army of Faith is a little less obviously strong, but there's people making it work. I know Jeffrey Kolodner is a big fan of it, and he's been testing out Army of Faith over Bringers of Flame, which was the de facto, this is the best attachment people were talking about. And even Hollowed Martyrs is still a very good choice. It's got the good tools with Suffering and Sacrifice, and just generally, Sisters are going to be at the top with everybody else for the next few weeks, I assume. And last above the zone, we've got Blood Angels. Art of War rated them as the top army in the game, and it's very hard to disagree with them on this one. They've still got the same good tools that they've had for the last 6 months, which are, Death Company with Lamarties, Ball Predators, the generically good Marine stuff like the Scouts. They benefit a lot from the new transport rules. Van Vets are pretty attractive. Van Vets with jump packs and a Sanguinary Priest for the Feel No Pain is a pretty attractive unit right now. The Sanguinor is still good. They just do fast melee better than the other fast melee armies right now, and that puts them in a very high position.
Thousand Suns are still up there. They're just bordering that zone at 55%. 36 players for them as far as the last week's data.
They took some tweaks, but when the whole meta shakes up, if you're only taking small tweaks, you're coming out on top.
I mean, they've only had small tweaks over the last few updates because they really haven't been touched too much. It's just other armies getting changes that make them better or worse depending on the matchup.
Adeptus Custodes at 54% right now is pretty astonishing to me. Again, I assume these numbers will continue to evolve as people learn how to play with the new missions, but I did not expect them. Obviously, they got better in the update with some points drops across the board and some changes to their rules, but as a whole, I did not expect, I believe it's almost a 10% boost from the lower 40s to now the lower to mid 50s. If I had to assume right off the bat, it's shield captains being able to use their free strat on all the strats now. The Venatari going down a ludicrous amount of points. That data sheet is insanely good, and probably just the generic good stuff still being taken. Some Grav Tanks, some Canis Rex, some Curia Draxus, and then just the Wardens and Custodian Guard.
Yeah, most players are playing Shield Host by the looks of it, with that one outlier of Null Maiden Vigil, which actually won an event.
Yeah, the Null Maiden Vigil list that was actually, I think it was 3 Grav Tanks and Canis Rex, is sort of hilarious. I think it might have also had a Telemon, I can't remember exactly, but it was not the 1200 points of Sisters of Silence that you might think of.
3 tanks and a knight. That sounds like a Custodes list to me.
Going towards the middle of the pack, usually the middle's not super interesting, but we've got some interesting factions in there. We've got both Necrons and Grey Knights at a 51%. Necrons were consistently a top army ever since their codex released in December, and it seems like they've finally been brought down to a fair position over the course of rules updates and points hikes and mission changes and all that. And I would still expect Necrons to continue to hover around the 51 to 52% win rate, but Grey Knights at 51 is pretty surprising to me. They took a couple points hikes on the Dread Knights, which are still one of the best data sheets because they're one of the only things that can actually shoot. But I had thought they were in a good spot to play the new mission pack pretty well. The action heavy stuff does hinder them a little bit. They don't have a whole lot of trash, but I would not have expected the mission changes to bring them down like so far, and I would not be surprised if over the next couple of weeks or next month if they slowly inch their way back up to that 53 to 54%. And then also in the middle, Tyranids at that 50% is a great sight to see. I'd like to take a look at the detachment breakdown on that, but I'm imagining people are happy to have rules that work in the way you would want them to work.
Yeah, can definitely second that. The sub-factions on there are looking pretty good. The Assimilation Swarm's not doing great, and the other ones are all floating between 47 and 53%. So they're all seeing a little bit of opportunity to do stuff.
Have you had any games with them after the update, Alex?
No, not yet. Been busy.
What are you looking forward to trying out the most?
One of the things I think has some real legs under it is the Synaptic Nexus. Because of Neurotyrants and Zoanthropes being able to be in a unit together, you can get 6 Zoanthropes whose stronger range profile is the equivalent to a Las Cannon. You can get them hitting on 2s because the Neurotyrant gives them +1 to hit. You can also give them +1 to wound if they're shooting a battle shocked unit. So at strength 12, that's just a lot of potential damage you can put out. And they are obnoxiously difficult to move because their 4-up invul just makes them tedious to get rid of. 4-up invul and 3 wounds is never a fun model to get rid of 6 or 7 of. So I think that has some real legs. If I wasn't doing that, I would be doing Vanguard Invader, or the Vanguard Onslaught. I mean, just because there's so many different opportunities there with the Advanced and Charged, but really fast models out there, and I think that the big snake monsters might have some real competitive play right now.
Vanguard did pull a win, so that's the only detachment to actually pull a win so far.
And I definitely can understand why. I feel like they have a lot of fun little tricks that they can do. Popping up Molochs on turn 1, or on turn 2 in your opponent's deployment zone is not fun. So that'll definitely be some fun things you can do.
So what you're saying is you're not crushed because Sporebinds are OC0 now.
The army is more fun to play now. I think that you're going to have to try harder to score secondaries, but you're going to have way more fun playing.
Then guards at 50% vehicle heavy lists rather than artillery heavy lists. They even got a event win over the past week. So your Tau got 2 event wins.
I believe one of them is Montcalm, one of them is Retaliation Cadre. Retaliation Cadre benefiting from the point strapped crisis suits, and Farsight being able to use free strats, -1 CP on all of the strats instead of free strat in Retaliation that didn't do anything at all. So the list is still not my preferred method of playstyle in that it mostly focuses on just trying to table your opponent through guns, because I played a lot of Kalyan, and Kalyan would probably run into the same problem as Retaliation, where your focus on tabling works great until you run into an army that you're just not efficient into, and your plan sort of falls apart from turn 0. So I've been having a lot more fun with Monka because I feel like the tools it offers you allow you to play games into more things. But Retaliation is definitely solid if you can get a pathing into armies that don't just sort of ignore the buffs you're putting out and the guns you're putting on the table. They're at 48%. I don't think that's indicative of the faction. They're sort of down there with CSM at 48 and Dark Angels at 48, where I feel like they're being brought down by some factor or another. I think CSM has too many options, which is funny to say. They've got sort of the Space Marine problem where there's a lot of ways to build a list poorly, but I feel like at a top level performance, these armies should be performing above 50%. Also in the same range here, we've got Admech, which is not something you'd normally want to say about a 48% army, but it's great to see him there. I've talked to a couple of the local Admech players since then. I've played a couple games against them, and people just generally seem to be enjoying the new updates. I don't think anybody expected them to shoot up past that 50% win mark, but we've got to start somewhere. I think GW is going to get a great baseline over these next couple months and figure out what to improve next, because I don't think it's a secret. AdMech still need to be improved, but it's a good starting point, and people are enjoying playing the faction again from what I've seen.
Yeah, they're actually playable now, whereas before it was you're going to be in pain if you're playing them at a tournament and going for that 35% win rate.
And then venturing on down into the depths of the win rates here.
Before we go there, let's talk about Eldari at 49% though.
Yeah, they continue to take seemingly random points changes. They took nerfs to their good trash, like for the 5th or 6th time this edition, with the Warp Spiders going up and Swooping Hawks going up and the Fire Dragons going up. I think maybe the Falcon went up as well. Don't quote me on that. And then GW did random decreases on all the Phoenix Lords that weren't Fugan. I think Eldar are, 50% is probably about right for them. They're elves, so they're always going to have tricks that high level players can pull out to beat scenarios that normal players wouldn't be able to do. But the faction does have some built-in weaknesses now. They're pretty expensive. They're kind of elite. They struggle to hold primary, which is negated a little bit by secret missions. But unlike their dark counterparts, their battle line is not anywhere as good. Guardian Defenders and Storm Guardians are okay, but they're not Kabalite Warriors being combat squatted by Venoms, right? They don't have the small transports. You can either put them in a Wave Serpent or a Falcon, both of which are prohibitively expensive. And they also just don't do as much by themselves. The Guardian Defenders are quite nice to give you Fate dice, especially when they're down to 6 now. And they come with a random Bright Lance, which is always okay, but they just feel sort of lost. They're just like a generic, this is what a good battle line unit should be. They're just not really outstanding in any way.
Then you were going into the below 45% win rate folks.
The depths of the win rate chart. We've got GSC at 43, Orcs at 40, Space Marines at 40, and Templar specific at 37. So where do you want to start?
GSC, I think. There's only 4 armies here below that magic number, so GSC is a good place to start, I think. Very limited play rate. I think this data is for 11 total players playing GSC over the past week and change since the changes came out. Yeah, you got 2 players running Brood Brothers, 2 players doing Xenocreed, which I think is an okay detachment. Outlander Claw could be fun, but I'm really surprised Biocentric Brood Surge didn't do as well. The Muscle Beach detachment, that one seems like it could have some decent play.
Yeah, I think they definitely took some hits, but there's also just the general shift in that the army doesn't play like people were expecting it to play. It's not playing the same way that they've been playing it for the last year and a half. So I think they suffer a little bit from people trying to figure out what's the best way to play them right now with so many new and different ways to play in the detachments. I don't think they're, great by any stretch. I don't think they're going to hit above 50% by the time the next data slate rolls around, but I think over time they'll probably hit north of the 45%.
It's, 2 sides of the same coin. So Sisters and GSC codexes, the time they were written, you know which army was doing well and which army wasn't doing that great based on the codex. I would like GW to not write a codex based on how the army is performing at the time they're writing it though, since they're just going to adjust those numbers anyway, because GSC kind of got just drilled into the ground. I still think there's play to get them to that 50% win rate, but they're going to need some minor point drops and other changes still, I think.
Let's get Space Marines out of the way. 40% isn't a real number. It's the same Space Marines that we've been seeing all edition. Space Marines are still good. They got some great changes with the impulsor and repulsor transport capacities. They just suffer from the divergent chapters that everybody's talked to death over the last 9 months, so I'm not going to beat it again here.
If we want to talk about now real armies, we can talk about orcs.
Yeah, that army took hits. Talk about an army that just got hammered for their codex, which I don't think we've seen before. Not in the way that orcs did. Sisters obviously took giant hits before their codex came out, but that was in line with the codex rules, right? They gave them a bunch of good rules and changed the points at the same time. They did the same for Tau. They gave them a bunch of good rules and changed the points at the same time. Orcs, they gave them a bunch of good rules and then waited a month for them to do really well and then said, okay, this was too much, and they just smacked that army down. They're going to need probably changes to Mega Knobs, definitely some points decreases, maybe another look at the Green Tide rules nerfs that they handed out. It was too much. They hit all 5 fingers when they only needed to smack a couple.
Orcs were only allowed to be good for a little bit, then they had to put them back. Put them back on the shelf.
There definitely were people putting them back on the shelf. You can see we've only got 50 players here, which is a far cry from the top 3 plate army, which they had been over the last couple of months of Leviathan.
Yeah, a good time to buy orc lots if you're looking. People will be selling them. But I mean, most of the games played are still actually detachment. Warhorde. Looking at the player count, Warhorde's 21.
Warhorde, it's suffering from success because it benefits everything. The issue with the specialist detachments is that they benefit too few of the army, and so they hinge solely on those datasheets being good. And I've found the same thing with Montka and Retaliation, where Retaliation only benefits the battlesuits. And so if the battlesuits aren't pushed to high heaven, you would rather take a detachment that benefits everything, because then you could get access to a wider variety of units. And Warhorde does the same thing. You can feel good taking a lot of the units because they're all going to get the buffs, they're all going to get access to the stratagems, and they're not relying solely on a few datasheets to carry the army.
And then Black Templars, because people are still playing Black Templars.
Yeah, that is a little astonishing to me. Not that they're still playing them, but because they're at 37%, that number seems made up. I feel like somebody logged these stats in with their hand over their eyes and just punched numbers on a keyboard. Black Templars, the generic good Black Templars Ironstorm we've seen, took hits. The enhancement hits, they took the stratagem CP decrease, they took the points increases on the multi-melta stuff, and the one person who was running 4 Repulsor Executioners is only allowed to run 3 now. But it was not enough to drop the army 20%. That number is astronomically large. I would hope they go up about 10%, maybe 15, once new Pariah Nexus gets rolling.
I mean, only one person playing Spearhead at the moment, as far as these numbers go. Then you have 8 players with just Gladius Task Force, and then the majority is the Righteous Crusaders, 13 players, which has a 29% win rate, which is skewing the data.
Overall, the meta is more spread out than it was, and I think that's to be expected, right? We just completely shook up the game. But I think it'll settle as we go into the next month or two. I think GW will have less aggressive changes to make. And I think when we look back in, at the end of the year, in 4 or 5 months, I think the game's going to be in a really good spot.
It's been better over the past number of months. This wide breach of armies that are within that 46 to 55% win rate is nice to see. I mean, there's a lot of armies hovering around 50%, and only a handful that keep dropping well below 45. But I mean, balance-wise, it hasn't been terrible. It's been okay compared to what I remember of 9th anyway. Speaking of 9th, let's look at the 9th dashboard.
Oh my gosh, I really don't want to. I would like to keep playing 10th.
Yeah, as of the last update, GSC was at 61%, Iron Hands 57%, Demons 55%, and you had a good just slew of armies below 45%. Thousand Suns at 42%.
Oh, how the weak have risen, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of armies in the middle that are still kind of around there. So, I mean, it's not terribly different, but there's definitely major differences on the top and bottom armies. And just so many games played with these armies at the end of 9th.
1,000 games of Custodes.
God. And no event wins.
Yeah.
Space Wolves, a whole bunch of event wins at the end of 9th. They were good at the end, and they're still getting better. So yeah, 9th was a made-up place. Let's not talk about 9th, I guess. So swings coming up. So we have Tacoma coming this weekend. We'll have more data after Tacoma, because it's a fairly large event. We had a few large events this weekend. I think there's a 100-player event going on this weekend at some point. So I'm curious what the Monday meta it's going to look like as far as win rates go and where people are going to average out. Because these numbers, they're good to look at, they're good to have, but they always feel a little bit skewed sometimes, especially if you compare to GW's numbers when they do their meta dashboard, which is always accurate.
Yeah, they did a MetaWatch article going over the changes they made to the cards and stuff in Pariah Nexus. It was a little odd because they were covering changes that had been made about 2 to 3 weeks before the video, but I guess I gotta put one out. Would it be a good time to transition from one Warhammer game to another?
Sure. Old World? That's what we want to talk about?
Yeah, I've heard the dragons are a menace over there.
Yeah, that and a dwarf box is coming out. That just got announced today. So if you want some old dwarf resin minis, on square bases, that's where you want to go.
Oh, that sounds just like what I want.
But Necromantis, new boxes coming out, and those are all really, really, really nice sculpts, by the way.
100%. It's a classic tale to see a great model announced on the GW Warhammer community front page, and then you click on it, and it's a model for Necromunda.
But these are some great Gene Stealer models. I want them all. And even those models, the human models I have up on screen now, look really, really good. They could use some really good, color effect paint, but they look really, really good. But yeah, let's talk about the rat in the room. Let's talk about Age of Sigmar a little bit here. So, release day was yesterday, the 13th, for the 4th edition of Age of Sigmar. My boxes will arrive Wednesday, so I'll be able to talk more about them next release, but I'm looking forward to Spearhead. Like we said, I think we said this before we started recording. I don't remember when, but we're gonna have a Spearhead games going on after the charity event happens. A lot of us want to get our armies together and just go through a bunch of Spearhead games, which can be played in about an hour and change. So pretty fast paced. I think it's gonna dethrone Warcry as like the quick good game, kind of what Combat Patrol I think should have been for 40k, because every Sigmar army has a Spearhead box. Even the Giants have a Spearhead box. It's just 3 of the little guys, but still, they even got a Spearhead for the Gargants.
Yeah, they tried to balance the new combat patrols against each other in 10th edition. They even like gave them their own special rules and enhancements or whatever. It didn't really work from what I've seen, so I'm excited to hear that Sigmar has an actual functioning system for low points for new players.
Yeah, and every Vanguard box is a Spearhead box. They're being relabeled as Spearhead as they come out. But I mean, there's Army in a box, there's rules for it, and it just looks like it's a lot of fun. And there's multiple different Spearhead lists. Like I know Skaven have a couple you can run. I'm pretty sure Stormcast have a couple you can run. So, you know, you're not really, at least for those 2 armies, I don't have the book in front of me, but at least for those 2 armies, you're not boxed into just that one, you know, particular Spearhead army.
Yeah, like my new Tau Combat Patrol where I have to run a commander and he doesn't have anything to lead. And it runs around with like a plasma rifle and a burst cannon.
Yeah, I don't. Combat Patrol, I wanted to like Combat Patrol. I wanted to get into Combat Patrol because, you know, small games, single box army. It's a good entry point for a lot of people, but it's not balanced and the rules kind of aren't great. But Age of Sigmar all over the place, 4th edition coming out, and I want to get some 4th edition tournaments going and just all kinds of stuff with Sigmar because, I don't know, I like 40k. I think Sigmar is a really good game though, mostly because all the models are just really, really good. Even the human guys are really good models. There's no Tyranids there, and there's no Tau in there, but still.
Ah, come on.
But we have lizards, though.
If there is a mech with a jump pack in Sigmar, that's how you get me to play it.
Well, you know, KO, the Overlords, the dwarf guys with the mechanical balloon jetpacks, you know, that counts, right?
I'll have to take a look. I'll get back to you on that one.
Look up the Karajan Overlords. They have airships and jump packs, and they're fully metal-coated dwarves, and they're a really cool army with a lot of shooting. And to your point, Alex, yes, we have dinosaurs riding dinosaurs.
Yeah, I will definitely trade space bugs for space dinosaurs. I'm okay with this.
And they are space dinosaurs. They're legit from space, or they were in 3rd edition. I assume they're still in 4th edition, but they are aliens, yes. One thing I'm seeing with Sigmar is, so they have spell manifestations, and those are free to take now, but they do have, you know, health and stat lines. So one of the complaints I'm seeing around the Age of Sigmar space is to not be gimped, you kind of have to buy the spell manifestations now to use because they are really good and they're all free. So it's an additional cost for a lot of players who weren't running them before because they weren't.
Yeah, it's always an interesting like chicken and egg scenario. Going off on a bit of a tangent here, when they're talking about do they buff units because they're bad or do they buff units because they're not selling when the reason they're not selling is because they're bad? I don't want to get too far into it. I don't have a problem with them making units playable no matter what the ulterior motive is. I think everything should have a spot in a game if they're making rules and models for it because it lets everybody run things that look cool.
Yeah, because I mean, that's one of the things we've said a lot through previous episodes and just outside of the podcast is, you know, models are forever, but rules change. Play the army you want because it looks cool, and, you know, rules may suck for now, but, you know, it could change. Look the way the meta shifted in 40k over the past year. But yeah, play the army you want to play, not the army that's at the top of the meta, because they're probably not going to be at the top of the meta list forever. Unless you're Eldari, then it'll last for like a year, and then you'll drop just below 50%. But yeah, the points increases. I was looking over the points document for Sigmar stuff, and 2 things come to mind. One, seeing an entire army being listed in like a small paragraph was nice. You know, when I'm looking at like, I don't know, Space Marines and it's like 3 pages of points.
When you're looking at AdMech and there's 17 units that are 70 points.
Yeah, it's just so silly. But seeing the points was nice. I mean, a lot of things seem to get points increases overall. I think we're going to see, you know, I want to say smaller armies, but smaller armies, like you can technically run 120 clan rats in a 2K game for Age of Sigmar because you can reinforce the unit. And you can have 120 of them. You can have 40 per unit, but that's almost 1,000 points for just those 120 models. So I don't think, well, I probably will at some point just to do it, but I don't think most people are going to be seriously running, 120 clan rats in their game. So points did increase, like Nagash, he went up 20 points across the boards, whatever. He's 880 points now. You're probably not going to see him still. Although I would like to see Nagash and Spearhead just like by himself as like, this is my army. I think that would be really funny and a lot of fun. But sadly, no, he's not his own Spearhead army. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Now we're getting a box to split up. I forget who wanted the Stormcast stuff, but we'll divvy all that crap out and go from there, and we'll get you playing some Sigmar Preston one way or another. But yeah, look up Karajan Overlords. They're the mechanical dwarf army.
I would probably want to actually play a magic faction and not the same faction that I play in 40k. That is something that I do miss, is having, the psychic phase. So I would want to play an army that does some spell casting and some melee just to get a change of pace. But
so what you're saying is elves?
Yeah, I wasn't gonna say it, but
I mean, they are a fun army, and I mean, they're a very magical army. So I mean, it's not a bad one. Tzeentch is another good mix. Sylvaneth is a good mix. I mean, that's the thing with Sigmar. There's wizards and priests in every army, just about.
We even have lizard priests that are like the scariest wizards.
Yeah, have you let that Croak sheet? Did he shape up okay?
Yeah, he's still pretty crazy. He has like a +3 to all of his casts, and he can cast like 3 spells a turn, and he's still really weird to kill.
He sounds like Eldrad.
So how it works, so he technically has 18 health, but at the end of the all the fighting and stuff is done, you roll 3d6 and you add the number of damage that has been dealt to him, and if that comes out to over 20, he dies. Otherwise, he heals back to full.
Huh.
You have to burst him down to kill him. Otherwise, if you do 3 damage to him around, he's just going to hang out all game, and you're never going to do anything to him. And he can unbind from an infinite range, which is neat.
Seraphon are a really cool army. I need to build my Seraphon. Sigmar is going to be a lot of fun. I really want to get more into Sigmar this year. I think I played 2 games originally when I got into 3rd edition Sigmar while I was doing 40k stuff, but then I just kind of flipped over to World Leaders in 40k and kept doing that. But I did buy, Seraphon, because the new models came out and the army's just really cool. Cities, OBR, various other things I won't mention. But I want to get into some 2K games of Sigmar, and I want to actually try competitive Sigmar, like tournament Sigmar. I think that would be fun. But yeah, you gotta get you some elves probably if you want, a spellcasty group. But again, every army does have that. So you can play an army that's got, casters. Cities, I have 2 priests, and you can get a few other wizards as well. So you can definitely add that kind to any army in Sigmar you want. But yeah, Illuminathorn Lords are like the casty magic army. So if you find some STLs, you got people here that can print an army for you if you don't want to buy an army. Just saying.
I will probably be more in the line of borrow an army for the foreseeable future, but who knows? I'm still young. That may change.
How's that feel? Because I don't know.
It's great. My knees work perfectly.
Well, that was hurtful. Really, really hurtful.
Does it hurt as much as your back?
No, just my knees. My back's actually good. Knees, not so much. But yeah, so I want to get more into Sigmar probably next recording. Like I said, I want to get the box. I want to dive into the Spearhead rulebook and the actual core rulebook that are in the box, which I think 40k should really take notes on and do that same kind of thing. If you're going to release a secondary mode like, Combat Patrol, put the book in the starter box. It'd be really nice to see them take notes from the Sigmar crew, I think, in general. But yeah, I think that about wraps all of that up. Any last commentary from anybody as far as, Sigmar goes, 40k goes, anything new up and coming you're looking forward to, like the Necromunda box, which I am halfway tempted to get mostly for the models?
I'm looking forward to the Jump Pack Canoness being by herself, which means it won't ever happen for at least a couple years. But on a more serious note, and I've said it before, I'm just really looking forward to seeing how the 40k shakes out over the next few weeks, because I think we're in a really great time for the game and really excited to see how it develops. Yeah, and actually one thing I did want to mention, I forgot to mention earlier, but rumors of a new Kill Team edition are floating out there based on an article that came out. The little Chow Now story they released yesterday, I think, maybe today, I'm not sure. But rumor is there's a new Kill Team edition coming, and Kill Team is something I do want to try, I think, because again, that seems like it could be fun. Along with that, the Tacoma this coming week at the event. Hopefully we'll get a new Codex roadmap. It'd be really cool to get a Codex roadmap so people can be excited for what's coming down the road, and we might actually get some more on the redacted one that they haven't talked about for 4 months. Yeah, I would definitely... There's some rumors floating around on a few factions that are,
looking to be getting there soon, but it'll be great to get that hype rolling again for people and really just get like a nail on the time frame, because they were kind of aggressive at the start of 10th, which I'm not opposed to. I'd rather everybody get their rules sooner, so we'll see how that develops going forward.
Yeah, it'll just be nice to see, because I kind of want a codex, but kind of don't for my army, because world leaders are actually just pretty good with the army rule. I'm not sure what they would do with the new codex, but I guess we'll see when it comes out at the end of 10th edition. So, because that's what I expect. Alex, we need to get you in some TTS games at least, because that way we don't have to unpack your army and you can just play yours over TTS, because I want to get a few sisters games in so I can figure out how the army actually plays, since I'm building that army out.
Yeah, we'll have to schedule one sometime.
And then I'll make Preston watch and, tell me everything I'm doing wrong.
Oh no, I'm already coaching John. I should just start charging a fee for this.
You should, just not to me, 'cause that's the way it works. But no, I'll flounder like I do, because it's fun. I'm okay playing bad. I know I'm a bad player, so I'm okay with that.
I'll flounder right there with you.
But yeah, I think that about wraps it for this week. Everybody, thanks for listening. If you want to reach out to us, openplaypodcast@gmail.com. We do have a YouTube channel now where I'm posting these the day after they release as podcasts. So a podcast will be usually a Wednesday release. YouTube will be a Thursday release. Discord is in the show notes and the YouTube links and everywhere. So come to the Discord, say hi. And other than that, everybody enjoy your week. Happy hobbying and have a good time. See y'all.
See ya.
See you guys.